Well, shall we go for it?
Yep.
Let's do it.
Okay. Hi, my name's Sarah Monk, and I produce a podcast called Materially Speaking, where artists tell their stories through the materials they choose. For the series, I've interviewed 25 sculptors working in marble around Pietrasanta in northern Italy. My interest in materials goes back to my childhood and watching my father carve Renaissance musical instruments from wood and covering them in leather. I now live and work in London, but I also spend a lot of time in Italy. Today, I'm delighted to have been invited to moderate a very special session for a group of women sculptors who call themselves the Stone Circle. Monika Majer met these women sculptors on Instagram during the pandemic. She found it so inspiring and encouraging to see other women sculptors working in stone and being close to their material that she invited them to an International Women's Stone Talk, and so the group was born. To celebrate International Sculptors' Day, they're hosting today's discussion, where they're going to talk about their work through the prism of touch. We thought touch would be a really good theme for this year, a year when we've not been allowed to touch many of the loved ones in our lives, and it's also been a time when we've probably been more grateful than ever for public art, pretty much the only art we've been able to visit and touch in person. So let me kick off with introductions. Then each sculptor is going to talk about their work through the prism of touch. And at the end, we'll have a general discussion about what we've heard. So first, I'd like to introduce Dawn Rowland. Hi, Dawn.
Hi.
Dawn is a fellow of the Royal Society of Sculptors, has lived and worked in San Francisco and Manchester, and now creates in London. Her sculptures are primarily carved in stone, but she also works in bronze, wood, terracotta, plaster, and silver. In stone, she employs the direct carving method and enjoys the physicality, freshness, and sensuality that comes with it. As a sculptor, she explores the interdependency and fragility of human relationships and how these fit into the world around us. As a woman, she expresses her own experiences. Her body of work she calls her personal and emotional CV, but the underlying feelings expressed are universal. And now to Martha Quinn. Hi, Martha. Martha joins us from Ireland, where she studied at IADT and graduated with distinction in sculpture and print. Inspiration for her work comes from nature, craft, and architecture, and she plays with the crossover between the realms of organic and geometric forms. Recently, she's become increasingly focused on the space around a sculptor and working in a site-specific way. In public sculptures, she likes to create a work that is integrated not only with its physical environment, but also within its social and historical context. And finally, Monika Majer. Hi, Monika.
Hi.
Monika is a stone sculptor from southern Germany. Apprenticed in a small sandstone quarry, she graduated as a stonemason in 1995, receiving the honor of being Germany's best. Since 2000, she's been a freelance sculptor and more recently has completed training as a craft designer and also in expressive art therapy. Flow, softness, and movement are the essence of her sculptures, which are made mainly of various German limestone and created for both private and for public places. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Sarah.
Dawn, can I invite you to start?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone.
Do you want the pictures directly?
Yes, the first one. Yes, please. Okay. Touch is such an important part of a sculptor's life. I love the fact that when I carve stone, I can touch it and feel it with every move I make. I like the fact that each time I put a chisel in one hand and a mallet in the other and make that contact with the stone, it decides to fight me back. This white granite sculpture called Boxed In certainly did that and also expresses feelings we all have from time to time. My sculptures touch upon the different periods of my life as a daughter, a woman, a wife, a mother and a grandmother. Next slide, please. In this Sculpture, my mother, myself, my daughter, myself. The mother becomes the daughter, becomes the mother, becomes the daughter. And so it goes on through the generations. Next sculpture, please. I'm also a twin and have never been alone in my entire life. I often show double images in my work. This sculpture, Balancing Heads, says life is always a balancing act. Next sculpture, please. I also carve hands to express emotion. Hands can be gentle, loving, and tender, but at other times violent and aggressive. In this sculpture, the warrior dreams his mother waits. The warrior is so young, he still puts his fingers in his mouth. His mother's hand on the other side straddles and touches her son. Unfortunately, you can't see that. The sculpture is all about touch. But as an art form, it is also about sight. Touch is important when you work it, and the finished sculpture can touch people's emotions in ways both positive and negative. When starting work, the sculptor can feel the texture of the stone and then make decisions which part they should leave untouched, textured, or very smooth. Next sculpture, please. That is why it is so natural an art form for the blind, and why I always give permission for the blind to touch my work. I want them to feel my sculpture, embrace it, caress it, feeling the textures and polished parts while walking around it and taking it all in. Some stones feel cold to the touch, others feel warmer. It is an art form that could not be more suited or understood by the blind. The physicality of their hands touching a sculpture makes it possible for the blind to understand the sculpture. It is so important that we sculptors allow them to do this. I know that the oil from hands can mark the stone, but I would prefer to go and rework the piece afterwards than not allow the blind to touch my work. And I've done this several times. I was really happy when a magazine for the blind told their members to go and touch my work at the Royal Academy. This sculpture, The Final Dream, was one of those sculptures mentioned. I think that the blind and sculptors are at one in understanding touch. If you are blind, your hands will caress and touch the stone, and the mind will take over and visualize and respond to what is happening and will be touched in a different way to a sighted person. Yet sculptors also touch the stone while working it, and it is so very different to working on a two-dimensional art form. Next sculpture, please. Sometimes touch can be enhanced by what is not expressed. My sister, myself, which is in black granite, shows two sisters who are close enough to touch, but they are not actually touching. I deliberately left this space between them as I wanted it to speak volumes about their closeness. Think of the finger of God and Adam in the Sistine Chapel. Mm-hmm. Next sculpture, please. This 2-ton sculpture is not a new piece, but I could easily have called it Touch. Here, a father and a mother embrace each other and their son, each caressing the other with their hands. The stone at the back is left natural, just as it came from the quarry. Everyone is touching in a tender and loving way, and I would hope anyone looking at it is also touched emotionally. Next sculpture, next slide. Children also need to respond to sculpture by touch, which is a necessary tool in their learning process. I love having children in my studio to play with clay or touch the stone. Here is a tiny child at an art show who puts his hands out and strokes my sculpture, Femme de Rocher, a moment caught in time. Next sculpture, please. This sculpture, Georgie, was a commission to celebrate the life of a child who died of leukemia. I carved 2 hands, one for the mother and one for the father. The child's head rests against the parents' hands, and once again I joined the child to them. The parents asked me not to make blindfolds, which I sometimes use in my sculptures to signify innocence, as I was told their daughter was never innocent, having been ill for so long. It's also a 3-ton piece. Next sculpture, please. I'm ending with this sculpture. I find it so wonderful to see how this new generation of women are beginning to bloom and grow in confidence. I wanted to say we are moving forward all the time, and I wanted to express that with this marble sculpture, which is called So Much More Than We Were Before. Thank you.
Wow. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Gosh, well, one thing that really touched me was that when we talked about touch being the theme, I think I was thinking of only positive things about touch. But when you said, Dawn, that touch can be violent too.
Yes.
And I thought we've also had the Me Too movement, a lot of people, a lot of discussion about privacy and, the inappropriateness of touch. So isn't it funny that touch has really been, in this year, it's been like huge.
But it's such a human emotion. I mean, that you want to touch, but if you're angry with somebody, you can also strike out, can't you? I mean, this is why I'm saying there's so much there to threaten these. We women have come so far, but we're still being threatened, or certainly younger women are being threatened. So it's a problem that still hasn't gone away.
Really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn.
So Martha, are you ready to give us your thoughts on touch?
Oh, you have to put your microphone on.
Yeah, no, I my internet keeps cutting out. So every time I have to rejoin, I have to keep checking the settings and whatever. So you might lose me mid presentation. But yes, I'm ready. Let's go.
Let's go. Lovely.
You want your picture right now or later?
Please, yeah. Now would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, so for this little talk for International Sculpture Day and focusing on touch, I deeply resonate with some of your comments, Dawn, about how to connect with people and, through the medium of touch, and also how to touch people internally. And this was why I chose this piece, because this particular image that you're looking at now is a model for a much larger piece. It was made in marble, and it was made as a public art commission for a hospital. And why I wanted to talk about this commission and that piece was because the people who would be looking at this sculpture weren't going to ever be able to touch. So how are you going to connect with these people or create something of meaning or of interest? So this was the focus behind and the inspiration behind designing this sculpture. Dawn, you mentioned it in your talk. If you can't physically touch it, you engage with people through sight. So when I was thinking about this, the topic of touch, the absence of touch, how to make connection, because that's what we've all been forced to do over these last few months and now years, is how do we cope in a personal way, in a societal way, when we can't touch, when we can't do business the way we used to, when we can't shake each other's hands, when we can't walk up to a sculpture, when we can't move around space. So this whole sculpture was designed with that in mind, how to create something that gave people that connection, how they could engage with it, but through the medium of sight. So do you want to go to the next photo?
Yeah.
So the reason why I showed the little model first was this is kind of the angle at which most people see it. The site itself, as I said, was in a hospital. There was a beautiful big window that caught the sunshine, but it was into an atrium, a kind of a little courtyard that was very grey, very dismal. And although it got the sunlight, it was obstructed by a kind of an overgrown kind of green evergreen tree that blocked out most of the light. So when I approached the commission, what I really wanted to do was to open everything up. And from that sunny window where people who would be passing by and often stop to talk, I wanted to create something that would give them a focus, give them a little moment to repose, and to give them a sculpture where I could, on the surface of the sculpture, and kind of become engaged, wander a little bit. This is a hospital where people would be staying off for longer periods. It was a rehabilitation, so people maybe who had a accident. So people really did spend a lot of time there and weren't necessarily ill in the way that you are in hospitals. So their minds would be busy, their souls would be, they're not, they would be there to regain. Designing this public piece was not only to create the garden, but also to create, hopefully, an access where people could, when either the weather was good or they were physically able to actually.
You just cut out a little bit there, Martha. So, I think she might have cut out quite a bit, actually. It's a really beautiful piece. And I think how amazing in a period where we are talking about when people are in hospital. Hi, you're back. You're back. Yeah, there you go.
I think
settings there.
Yeah, I think I've corrected the.
Hi.
Here we go.
So let's just. I think
this
cut out.
This is called.
Carry on. Oh, what a shame.
What a shame.
She will be back.
She will be back.
It's absolutely beautiful, that piece.
Isn't it gorgeous?
It's absolutely stunning. And what skill.
Yeah. And it really starts moving the longer look on it. It's unbelievable. It's like it's getting bigger all the time and moving and moving. It's really, beautiful.
We're admiring your piece. Are you back with us, Martha?
So I'm sorry I keep losing you there, but this is West of Ireland non-internet for you anyway.
West of Ireland.
Yeah, it's called Sunseed.
Yeah.
And so it was all about finding that insight. It was all about, focusing on that inner world. Mm. And I got one of my favorite bits of feedback of public sculpture ever from the actual director. And he wasn't on the art tab to select it. He did so. I wasn't too keen. It was an abstract piece of art. And it said, I like this. It's the first piece of abstract art I like. So I was delighted with that. I thought that was high praise because the attempt at making that connection was what he felt he wasn't going to get with an abstract. It's what they get, So yes, little lovely light-filled hemispheres that just open out, and that's the whole spirit of them. And I was so delighted that was what people took away from it. The gorgeous atmosphere of care and joy, and I can't explain how lovely it was to walk into an institution where you were in an institution. Like from the security guard that you would meet at the first, to the receptionist, to the director, to staff, everybody, and it was this lovely feeling of care and of cheer and of community. And to make a piece that kind of fit right with that and kind of added and extended that, it really reflected the kind of the ethos of the whole space, and the commissioning body that were responsible for incredibly rigorous, incredibly demanding, incredibly educated and informed when making their the questions that they asked of us sculptors submitting. And it was done in a very, and again, this feeling of respect was wonderful. Jumpy through hoops of kind of fear or kind of trying to exact or, to get blood from stone or whatever. This whole piece had that sense of, being magical, of being connected, of being together, and again, that together, connected, space apart. It's all about this. It's the relationships. It's the kind of the space in between things. So the people who
it's beautiful. I'd love to touch this piece.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting too that it was created for people who wouldn't be able to touch it at a time when we got the same.
I know.
We're all in love with this piece, by the way, Martha. Yeah. We're going to steal it when you next sneak away.
Good, because it's not really that heavy. It is.
Oh yeah, I bet it is. So what about what about the feedback from the people in the hospital?
Oh, wonderful! Like top down, bottom up. This is one of the most loved pieces I think I've ever produced. I also had an opportunity to do a little workshop with some of the residents there, and we did pattern. The whole it's very fabric of the place. The people I would have worked with or be dealing with have probably gone through their, their rehabilitation and lots of people through. But the feeling and ongoing appreciation and understanding, so it continues.
We keep losing you, actually, Martha. I wanted to. Yes, we lost you when you were talking about the workshop. Can you tell us again about the workshop that you did with the people there?
So the organizers felt that they wanted, everybody was looking at the piece to kind of some kind of connection to where the piece had come from. So I designed a little workshop where we were able to make patterns like those on the sculpture, object designs that was that people were physically able to do based on where some people needed help to manipulate. We did a kind of a paper version, a paper printing version of them. So I think the organizers were again in this kind of aspect of introducing the piece and letting people connecting with it. The whole spirit in which it was done, the whole approach to make it not land from ice was just lovely. From the point of view of an artist who works in publications, to work in that environment of invitation and collaboration and openness was just wonderful. The workshop was a part of it.
Great.
So this piece was actually made in PART1 or in Carrara.
Oh, so is it Carrara marble?
It is, yeah. This was made in a studio. There was actually the two large hemispheres were turned on a lathe out there, and then worked and then shipped over and installed. So it's another little piece of information on it.
Wow.
But yes, when you can't these things as well, the light in the photo is pretty amazing, but they seem to act like little sundials as well. Mm-hmm. So, obviously keep changing, that's the thing. Photos, that's an ongoing thing of it's not how you would see them if you were in the hospital. You see them from that side on view, from the other side of the ear. So I think that's an ongoing challenge that we all face as sculptors. It's much easier when people actually see them. That's why giving a model when you're proposing a sculpture is the best way to communicate something rather than a design or a picture. So I think we all miss that aspect of being able to physically show our work.
Present your work. To me also it feels a bit like a vortex. It's sort of drawing me in, and somehow also I can imagine if I was there sort of getting drawn up in time just passing, as indeed it has this year, where you sort of, it's expanded and contracted in a way I really don't recall in my whole life. And looking at this piece, I could imagine time also playing tricks on your mind. I could look at it for a long time and not know the time had passed.
Well, that's the aim, so I'm delighted. Yeah, they're definitely objects for contemplation.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, that's lovely. Thank you very much. Monika, can we turn to you and hear about your work and touch?
Yes. I have to get the screen shortly. So, yes, I think I first really started to really understand and to discover the meaning of touch for sculpting in 2015, when my right hand was numb after an operation for over half a year. And so I wasn't able to carve stone and to sense anything. So I missed sculpting so much. And in this time, I started to search for a possibility for one-hand sculpting. And in this process, a special casting technique just sort of happened to me. And I was digging in clay with my left hand and shaping round caves in the deep of the clay. And I shaped them blind and only by feeling the material and the movement of the form inside. So I will take this picture in. Oh, sorry, I have to do it this way so you can see this. So that's me in a womp.
It's a womp. Sorry, I'm very ignorant.
So for me, So for me, that was so beautiful because inside these caves, it felt really like a shelter, or it felt like being in a womp. So and I used these womps as molds for stone castings, and collected site-specific stones to make the castings. And I made a whole series of work of it and developed it then as a really special technique for large scale sculptures. So here you see one couple of large scale. Yeah, and these sensual womp mold experiences, they really left deep imprints. And when I started carving stone again, it was like a new beginning then. So through the experience then of the connection between the moving and shaping and sensing in these womps, the creation of the stone sculptures, it suddenly just flowed like naturally. So now when I begin to work on a new sculpture, I start from the inside with movement. And so it's my inner movement, but it's also the movement of the stone. And the stone, for me, it's just flowing material. And its essence is movement and change. It's just in another era of millions and millions of years, so we cannot witness it. But yeah, and these movements, my movement and the stone's movement, they initialize the movement of the form then. And this light flow in the shape, I can only find by being in touch all the time. So I have to be connected to the stone from the inside. But I also have to feel and sense the shapes, like to affirm the movement. So my working process is always to be close and in touch and staying connected inside and outside. In the moment of completeness, the sculptures they break away from me. And mostly people's first response to my sculptures is they have the desire to touch, and they want to touch it with the fingers and with the whole hand, and just feeling the surface and the flowing shapes. And especially last year when this little exhibition was in my studio and only 2 persons with a mask, but touching was allowed. So that was really beautiful. Yeah, and the bigger sculptures, they are an invitation to really get in touch with the whole body. And so the stone can also be really a bearing material and give nurturing and powerful energy in a close contact like this. Yeah, so that's it. So that's my most precious gift then, to witness such a joy of perception like this.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. And it makes me think, because I know that, you said you trained as arts therapist, if that's the right expression. And I'm thinking, being calm, finding ways of calming ourselves through this period has been so important. And if we can't touch other people and have a hug, do you think, have you noticed, both your perception of what your sculptures, what people take from the sculptures has changed?
Yes. I think I first realized that it changed in my approach, because for me, touch became more and more important also in my work. And then it was really interesting to witness how people reacted when I talked about that. I talked about the touch, and I did not even have to invite them. They came themselves and just wanted to touch. And it was almost like touching skin, feeling the stone, like really like you would touch skin. So the people's approach was like this. Yeah.
Is that something you've noticed, Dawn and Martha, too, this year?
Definitely. You go first, Martha.
Yes and no. I think I've certainly noticed it in a personal sense, but I think, are finding those connections through screens. Everything for me is kind of flattening. Everything is becoming image-based, or certainly, I see pictures of Monika's sculptures, and I can see that they're the most tactile things, but I'm applying my mind to it. I'm looking at her pictures, and everything that you say, Monika, completely resonates with what I'm seeing as your sculptures. It's totally 100% connected. I can't get that feeling directly. We're having to translate all the time. There's always a gap or a space. And a personal way, what's funny, what I have noticed in a kind of a professional sense is that people have made the effort to engage with art more, actually. And they've, at the beginning of the lockdown, the coronavirus, hold, or a couple of weeks and months into it, there was this huge effort of kind of resurgence of kind of commitment to making sure that these things did happen. So I think every kind of the outside of art and sculpture and whatever have to live. We still have to push forward with these things, and maybe in their world things like sculpture became more important. But I certainly found that in those 2 commissions that were paused, there was a huge amount of effort to make sure that they didn't just go by and just fall off. So everybody else, this is our world. We live in this. We create. This is our 100% time. But I think everybody else started to create value on it. So I don't know whether that's other people's experience.
What about you, Dawn? Did you notice a change?
I didn't notice a massive change, because people have always touched my work. It's just something. And I mean, somebody, I think it was one of the exhibitions, somebody said we should put a bucket near the work. I mean, it's very different. I mean, it's not as, it's more modern classicism than any of your work, you know, most of the people here. But people still always want to touch it, and I don't have a problem with that. And they're still touching it now. But I mean, for me, I've always touched my work. The latest piece is called "Do Not Touch Your Face." But yes, I mean, touch has been so important that it's very hard for me to say that it's any different now through the pandemic. Other things have changed, but that touch part, apart from not being able to hug my family and my kids and my grandchildren, I still, thank goodness, got my husband to hug. As far as the art's concerned, I'm still going to the studio, I'm still making work. And it's been quite difficult because the exhibitions I've been in have sort of closed the day afterwards. So I haven't really observed how people have reacted to the work because they're not seeing it.
Yeah, and as Martha said, it's all becoming very virtual and very, very a bit more intellectual, which is.
But I don't see sculpture in that way, because I don't think, unless you walk around, I mean, sculpture, as opposed to a painting, is so physical. I mean, I know some people who don't like sculpture because they find it takes up too much space, you know, that it's more imposing to have it, to live with. So you need to walk around it. You need to see it from every single angle. Maybe holograms would be the best thing. I don't know. There's going to be a way of doing it, but right now, seeing one side, like you know, did with the Warrior Dreams, His Mother Waits, because there was a piece of, when I made that, you know, and I'm a direct carver, when I did, I knew there was a piece that I should whack off, you know, and yet something in here said, don't you dare do it, don't you dare do it. And I didn't really know it was, but towards the end, because I suddenly realized, of course, it's the hand that joins the mother who's waiting for her warrior son. So, you know, there's something that's happening that you don't actually, you think you know what you're doing, you think you've worked out what you're doing, and then all of a sudden something pops up. Mm-hmm. And you obviously, it was something on a different level that not a creative accident, as we all have at different times, but something that's deep down that comes out.
Yes.
It's very weird.
So I was going to ask, do any of you have very early memories, the first time that you experienced and were moved by touching stone? Was there a time when you sort of can remember being moved by the feel?
Oh, I'm giggling.
I think it's always on the beach. Because I mean, I go into the mountains now and I walk for, you know, we have walking holidays. But when I was a child, it was always the beach and the stones on the beach that have been softened by the waves, and then the pieces that are broken up. And also, stones mean, you know, I'm Jewish, so that when people go to the cemetery, we put stones on the grave. Mm-hmm. And I go and I give a piece for each person, you know, of the family. Gosh, but the first images was definitely at the beach.
Pebbles, yes. Pebbles. I think for me too. How about you, Monika? Do you recall?
I think for me too. Yeah, and I remember when I was trekking in Norway for 3 months when I was young. So, and there were also always these stone things that marked the way. So I looked at them and then I knew, oh, that's the direction, that's the direction, that's the direction. So I love this too, to have the stones as a sign on the path. Yeah.
That's nice. How about you, Martha? Do you have early recollections?
That because my mum was a glacial geologist, so I grew up experiencing stone at every level. You know, my mum was doing her PhD, so she would dig up stone samples, and we were constantly surrounded by the idea of stone as well as actual stone. She also was a great influence in terms of bringing us to ancient sites, monuments, our Irish stone circles, you know, the ancientness of these massive structures. Things like your birthdays or whatever, you were brought to some castle, some ruin, you know. These were our destinations of celebration as well. So always surrounded by stone. I kind of laugh now because, you know, I just feel I was kind of bred for this job. But my last job that's ready to be finished is a series of stone markers for a walkway here in Sligo. So they're a series of stone pieces that are going to mark a trail for a beautiful walk through the woodlands. And it's a very long, it's called the Sligo Way. It's an 80 kilometres. So I'm just finished another 10 that are going to be installed. But that tradition of stone marking either birth or death or way, you know, the symbolism, the attachment to that, it has been a driving force for me for as long as I can remember. So predating being an actual sculptor.
Wow, that's beautiful. And what a wonderful synergy, finishing with the Irish stone circles for stone circle women. Well, thanks so much to Dawn, Martha and Monika for a really interesting, lovely look at your beautiful, beautiful work and to chat. If you want to know more about these sculptors' work, please visit their Instagram accounts. We'll be putting their profile names up in a minute. And if you like podcasts, I will be releasing more episodes of Materially Speaking, where artists tell their stories through the materials they choose in the next few weeks. So you can check those out on Instagram as well. So we really hope you've enjoyed this discussion, and we wish you a wonderful International Sculptor Day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, fellow sculptors.
Bye, bye.
Great.
It's great. Now I stop the recording. Or
yes.
Just shout out, yay!
Yes. Well done. That was wonderful.
Yeah.